What's good, everybody? I'm Jason Webb, and this is the Over Quota podcast, where I interview founders, CEOs, sales leaders, and top enterprise software salespeople about the keys to consistently exceeding sales expectations. Now, my goal for these interviews is for listeners to get something beyond what they might get from traditional sales training and coaching, and hear from real people, like my guest today, about how to drive real results consistently over time. One other thing that I'll mention before we get started is that the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this episode. So until we get sponsors, I'm going to sponsor these episodes myself. My company helps software companies recruit top salespeople. So if you want to learn more about that, go to thejddavidgroup.com/hiring. So today I am super excited to have on a guest here that I met over 10 years ago when I was actually recruiting for a company. I'm not even sure if it was locally here in Boston, Ed. It might have been somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic or something like that. I'm not sure. But anyways, they're looking for a VP of sales or CRO of something, and you were kind enough to engage. And then I remember I was actually trying to find the email, but I couldn't find it today. I remember I got an email from you somewhere around, like it was like 2009-ish or so, 2010, something, that basically you told me that you had started your own company. I was like, hey, congratulations. Like that's great. And now, like, just I've been watching from afar, and I've seen everything that you've done, and I've seen your growth, and it's just been absolutely amazing. And I love the fact that it's locally grown, right? That you're growing it here in Boston. So, anyways, without further ado, let me introduce you to Ed Calnan. He's the co-founder and CRO of Seismic, which is a sales enablement solution that arms sales reps with the right information at the right time. We'll ask Ed a little bit about that in a second. From what I can tell, and just from the data that I've been able to find, they're over $100 million in annual recurring revenue now, and somewhat of a unicorn, I believe, which we'll talk about in a second, and somewhere between maybe 800 and 1,000 people, something like that. We'll get Ed to sort of fill us in, and then also he was named a top Boston startup founder over 40 by Tech.co. So Ed, welcome to the Over Quota podcast.
Thanks, Jay. Nice to see you again.
Absolutely, of course. So let's just start with Seismic for a second. Talk to me a little bit about what the value proposition that Seismic offers to the marketplace.
Yeah, so we solve an age-old problem, which is marketing creates a bunch of stuff and sales doesn't know where to find it, and they don't know how to use it appropriately on meetings. And so if you are Seismic customers, we help empower salespeople tell the right stories at the right time. And go ahead.
So tell me, as an example, right? So when you say tell the right stories at the right time, do you remember, and if you don't, that's I would understand, but do you remember the first $1 million deal that you did with Seismic?
Oh, without a doubt. You never forget the first million. In fact, we skipped, so we did a bunch of deals that were like 500K up towards like 750K, and then we skipped the first technical $1 million deal. We did a multi-million-dollar deal with one of our largest customers, Hewlett-Packard, was the first one.
So tell me this, right, to help our listeners understand and for people to understand Seismic a little bit better. During that sales process, how did you apply data and having the right information at the right time during that sales process to enable that sale, to close that deal? Remember the details of that?
Yeah, of course. We use our own product to prepare for all of the meetings. Mm-hmm. What Seismic does is we listen. Now we have about 750 customers. We're in 15 different countries. We have a bunch of different industries. We have, and our infrastructure listens to millions of stories every year that sellers are telling to their prospects and customers. So when I say stories, I mean, what presentations are they using? What videos are they using? What case studies are more effective than others? What white papers resonate? When to use an ROI model? We listen to all of those interactions through integrations with email and CRM and other systems. And then we use our machines on the back end to help the sales teams get smarter over time. So as we listen to those interactions and we see how opportunities are progressing through the pipeline, we bubble up those stories to the top. And so when we were chasing HPE, it was really simple. Seismic told us what other tech companies used the product, what tech companies were in the Bay Area, what other CMOs fixed similar types of problems, and it effortlessly helped us prepare and deliver a perfect story to help win that deal.
Amazing. That is so cool. And it's funny, like as I was looking at your website, I got that, but just to hear that level of detail, right? That they're looking at the email and looking at the reading conversations and seeing what's working is really, really cool. So since this is focused on helping, whether it be sales managers improve or salespeople improve, and obviously, given the fact that Seismic is a sales enablement tool, I guess the question that I have is that if someone is armed with the right information at the right time, and they're using Seismic, right? They're using a tool that's going to enable them and help them be successful. What have you found, whether it be internally at Seismic or just across the board, the difference between salespeople that are I guess the top salespeople from everybody else, even though they have the same information?
It's a really good question. I think, you know, now it's almost so I think there's two types of players, right? Especially, you know, sales as well as I do, probably better. There's people that take their craft really, really seriously and focus on improving and getting better. And then there's people that just kind of, you know, go about their motions during the day. And I think, you know, with great athletes and great musicians and great creative people, everybody's always looking to push the boundaries of their skill sets. And I think, you know, for the top salespeople, that's kind of, that needs to be kind of inherent, right? And it has to be, not only do we make it super easy for people to find the stuff that they need, but also being able to apply that information to the current situation you're in, right? Mm-hmm. I think I always tell the sales team that great sellers do three things well, right? They prove that they understand the business problem that the customer's trying to solve. They prove that they've solved it for somebody else before them. And then they prove that if the customer gives them $1, they're going to get $2 back. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And that's what our product actually helps people do effortlessly with no preparation, you know, taking that content and applying it to the situation and delivering a compelling story. You know, that's the human aspect of sales that we'll never get rid of, right? The machines can tell us how to prepare. They can tell us what odds we have. They can tell us what the probabilities are. But at the end of the day, it is about relationships and trust and delivering that story with empathy and with conviction, and to build that trust in order to do deals.
So mentioning empathy and trust and conviction, and frankly, that machines can't do it all and that the products can only go so far. I heard you say that, you know, obviously soft skills are really important. And I think even more important when you're talking about multi-stakeholder deals. I mean, I heard you say actually sometimes you have 85 touch points or something, as many as 85 touch points in the sales process. So talk to me about that. Like, what are the soft skills that you feel are needed to sort of bring out the empathy and conviction, those types of things, and how can one, or what does it look like when, I think you said something to the effect of, you know, creating a relationship strong enough so that when you're not in the room, like the stakeholders or the champions really want you to win. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's really, I think we're at an interesting crossroads here in the sales profession where there's so much data and information and tools available that I think people don't appreciate, you know, how difficult it is for the human aspect to play a factor in the day-to-day job. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, sales cycles that have multiple touch points. You know, there aren't any sales cycles in enterprise software anyway. We sell SaaS solutions to big companies. There are no single threaded deals anymore. You know, we're working on a transaction this quarter. We end in 8 days, 7.5 days to be exact. And it's an opportunity in Asia, and there's 63 gates in their procurement system to get done. So now I think the job is almost shifted to a place where the selling landscape is so complex and there's so much, we're almost having to educate our buyers how to buy at their own companies. And if you don't lean on technology on the backside to help you prepare and save time and identify opportunities and do all that other stuff, you're just not going to be able to manage both. If you sell to, we have purchases of $20,000 going up to the CEOs of billion-dollar companies, just because the process is so intricate nowadays. It's almost as hard to get a $20,000 deal done as it is to get a $20 million deal done.
That sounds depressing. To be honest with you.
That's why my hair looks so great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. Okay. And so within that, though, as you're navigating, and let's say, for instance, you're in the room and there are multiple decision makers across the table and what have you, what is needed from a salesperson, from a soft skill perspective, to say, okay, like this person, I'm inherently, based on the question that they asked, I know that this person cares more about, their status within the company, let's just say, right, getting promoted or looking good for their boss, or this person cares more about saving money, or like what are some of the things that, I guess, and frankly, as a sales leader, that you can do to tease that out during an interview process, even to vet and say this person has that soft skill where this person doesn't necessarily have that. Is there a way to sort of articulate that and put that into words?
I think most of it's preparation, right? It's really understanding who they are, where they fit, doing your homework, and then trying to really kind of align what your solution does to the company's goals. That's really what it is. As we look here at the beginning of 2020, as a salesperson or a sales leader, if you're not using all the information at your disposal to try to figure out what objectives the company has, and then to try to tie those objectives back to your solution set, and then tie those objectives back to the individual stakeholders, you're probably going to lose more than you win, right? And I think it's all about, it's all about earning the trust through the sales cycle. Our fiscal year ends at the end of January, so we're in fiscal 20, about to head into fiscal 21, and well, we're 8 days left. We got, like most software companies, the last month is usually one of our biggest months. And I tell, a lot of the sales leaders or people you talk to are like, oh, it's closing time and you got to go push someone to do something. And I tell my team all the time, like you earn the right and you build the trust to make the tough call this week 8 months ago. And that's when you have to build the relationships and build the empathy and try to decide what matters to these folks and earn it. You earn the right to call and have a sometimes uncomfortable conversation at the end of the quarter, 2 quarters before that. And so I think it really starts with understanding what the company's objectives are, and then understanding how the individual's objectives tie to those, and fixing problems. That's really what it's all about.
Let me ask you this as it pertains to data, and I just wonder if you actually have the data on this, which is that I heard you say once that the Seismic will save an average of something like 30 hours, save a rep, I think it's like 30 hours per week, right, of work, and sort of trying to gather all that information. I'm assuming then that also shortens the sales cycle, right? Shortens the sales process. Do you have any sort of empirical or information on that in terms of the fact that from a strong salesperson, somebody that that would be a really good fit for, say, an enterprise sales role, understands how to, I guess, speed up the sales process or drive the sales process away, control the sales process in a way more so than the next person who might, take, let's say, 12 months to close a deal, where somebody else may take 9 months to close the deal. Talked about the effectiveness of that and what role that plays.
Yeah, I think, saving time and executing cleanly are 2 totally different things, right? You can save an idiot a ton of time, and they're still an idiot with more free time on their hands, right? And but if you give a master at their craft 30 hours a week or 30 hours a month back to do more thoughtful things, you're going to be in much better shape. And the intelligence that our platform listens to and gathers is really interesting, because we really try to help the software tries to help the reps use the right content at the right stages of the cycle, right? And we do that upstream now as we nurture buyers through their journey, as they educate themselves. Where as sellers, we usually fall down as we don't do that in the sales cycle of a B2B purchase. We just kind of start over, and we don't use all of that information to our advantage sometimes. And I think, you know, as far as executing well, I think it's really about listening to the problem that you're trying to solve. And if you leverage the technology at your disposal, you can actually do that. Like our average deal cycle, well, when customers adopt Seismic, you know, they save 30 hours a month per rep in busy time. They close deals 2 weeks faster. Average pipeline bumps up by a couple $1 million in the first quarter. I mean, so there's real statistical evidence that shows if you do things correctly, the business will benefit immediately.
Wow, it's amazing. All right, let's talk a little bit about team building and growth, because obviously I'm just fascinating the growth that you've had at Seismic, and I want to get the numbers from you in a second, but I want to shift towards management and how to find good leadership, because obviously you can't lead the entire sales team by yourself, and you've obviously hired people to do that. But first, set the stage for me. How many employees does Seismic roughly have now?
Almost 1,000.
Okay, almost 1,000. Okay.
Yep.
And then how many of those are salespeople?
Just about 220 on our team now.
Okay. When you first, you bootstrapped, and I know it was you and just a few other guys to begin with. When you started selling and you got to the point where you were at the stage of growth where you needed to hire a level of management between you and the reps that you were presumably managed, like how did you come to that decision? Like what was in your thought process to say, okay, now is the time I feel that I need to add a level of management and step back and be more strategic?
Yeah, I think it was more bandwidth than strategic. You know, I was in every single deal at the beginning, obviously, because it was just me. And then, you know, I hired on, you mentioned that we bootstrapped the company early on. So anytime I'd sign 2 customers, I got to hire a sales rep. And so first one I hired was a friend of mine from college that I had worked with before. Second one I hired was my top sales rep at EMC. Third one I hired was my second best rep at EMC, and then kind of scaled out from there. And I'm lucky enough to have worked on teams where I've been around a lot of talented people, and I'd say 90% of the people we hired in the early days were people that had worked for me or with me at one point, which is one of the fun parts of starting a company, is because you get to handpick the people that you want to go to work with every day. But at some point it got to the place where it was critical mass, and it was, you know, I'd say we probably had 12 or 15 reps at the time. And so I split the teams in 2, and I promoted 2 of the reps to be managers. And it was hard because the first 3 reps were all selling really well, and 2 of them had managed before and 1 of them hadn't. And I had to have a hard discussion with the one who didn't. As you know well, interviewing and placing sales leadership, not always does the best sales rep translate into the best sales leader. In this case, that was the situation, and thankfully everybody the 2 managers I moved ended up, one is still a leader of a big sales team. The other one has helped to integrate a couple of the acquisitions we've done, so he's kind of on the M&A side a little bit. And then the one that I didn't pick for a manager is still one of our top producers. He's still an individual contributor and has been in our top 3 over the last probably 8 years, and he's still incredibly successful at his job too.
I feel like there was just one lightning in a bottle after another that you just rattled off. The fact that you had people at the very earliest stages that you hired, that you had a relationship with, that you, frankly, one of them you had to have a tough discussion with, that they're all still there and that they're all doing well. I just feel like that is so unusual, especially because of all the growing pains that, you know, when I talk to candidates, sometimes they get a little bit skittish about seeing, let's say, a job posting at the same company all the time and wondering what's really going on there. Are they growing, or is it, you know, turnover, or, you know, what's going on? And sometimes you even see, or I have to frankly have discussions with my candidates and say, you know, such and such is, you know, laying off a whole bunch of people. So, you know, we're not recruiting for that position anymore. And oftentimes I say, well, you know, they're in high growth mode, and, you know, the first people that they hired are necessarily the ones that they need now for this stage of growth. And so it's not, you know, it's just, they're sort of working it out as they go. And it's just so many different variables that can happen. But to hear you say that they're still with you is just absolutely amazing. But one thing that you just said that stuck out that I want to follow up on is you worked with them previously, you managed them previously, and then you started a company, and I don't know exactly, like, you know, how many months in or whatever, where you were in terms of revenue at that point. But what was it about you, do you think, that that gave them the confidence to say, yep, I'm going to hitch my wagon to Ed, and he's gonna lead us to good things?
I don't know, maybe I bought them a bunch of beers one night and I got them and they were weak.
Yeah, right.
I think, you know, I think it's, you know, I've done a couple of high growth companies. Some have been really successful, others not. And I think when people see you through good times and bad times, they understand what type of leader you are, right? It's easy to be a great leader when things are going great. It's a little bit more challenging when things stink. And we all go through those periods in every company we're at. And, you know, I think I've always treated people fairly. You know, I'm not one of those managers. I'm looking at your trophies behind you. I'm not one of those leaders that gives everybody a trophy, because I don't think everybody deserves one. And I think, you know, I've always wanted good coaching. I think great athletes and great creative people, and, you know, there's no better musician than one with a great producer, right? Who sits there in the control room and tells that incredibly talented artist that, hey, you know what, that wasn't the right take. Let's sing it again. And you know, I've always tried to offer that to my folks, and I've always found that the best people, you know, take coaching and put it into practice in real time. And you know, when you treat people right and you treat them like adults, you know, they want to work for you again at some point.
It's amazing. A couple of things, I guess. You mentioned coaching. What's the difference to you between coaching and training?
I think there's completely separate. So you can coach someone during training, but training, in my opinion, is kind of like, it's like, you know, when I think of it in our business, it's like you start and you get your manual, your little binder thing, and you go through your classes, you get your certifications, and then you're trained, right? So it's like you've completed a curriculum or a process. I think coaching is every single day. It's when, you know, you're having a rough quarter and it's Friday night and I'm driving home and I know you're driving up on vacation with your family, and I give you a quick call to say, hey man, it's going to be cool. Like, enjoy the weekend. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out next week. Or, you know, sometimes when you know, you're way ahead on the leaderboard and, you know, I send you an email and tell you that maybe you're not as good as you think you are, you know, so you're only as good as your last deal. So come back next week, humble and ready to go again.
Yep.
You know, I think you have to really, when you run a team, you have to understand what makes everybody tick, and you coach people differently. I mean, training, everybody can kind of go through the same process. Coaching is in the moment, in the tough times, in the good times, and then each person takes coaching very, very differently, and each person's motivated very differently. And, you know, I ride people pretty hard sometimes, but I also know when to let up on them as well. And I think that's the hallmark of a good coach.
Is there a way to drive, again, just looking at your growth and understanding that, I think you said you had 15 people before you split the team and all that. And, you know, you're mentioning here that each person is different and you're treating them as individuals. Is there how do you, I guess, drive the numbers, right? Like the heart, like if you need to hit the number in the quarter or the year or whatever, like what is the key to that? Because I feel like that must go beyond just what you were talking about in terms of soft skills and either, you know, kicking somebody in the butt or patting them on their back or whatever at certain times. Is there a, I guess, a system or a process or something that you use or focus on to sort of get people, like Bill Belichick's a perfect example, right? I mean, you talk about process and you talk about system. It seems like the guy, regardless of what the personality is in, the guy plugs something in and people fall into that process and system and it works. Like, talk to me about what some of the keys are that have been for you and in your leadership.
Yeah, I think you know, it's really one of the most famous management quotes is you got to put the right people in the right jobs, right? And that, I think, you know, coach does that really well, and that applies to every business, whether it's a sports team or a sales team, you know. And that's actually a hard thing to do that I found at Seismic growing, is to try to figure out how to put the right people in the right roles, right? Because we've done a really good job promoting. So one of the things I'm most proud about is our career track for salespeople. So we hire fresh grads, you know, like a lot of SaaS companies do, start them on the inside, give them a bunch of training, move them to the outside. And, you know, we have people here that 8 years ago started as a fresh grad and now are running sales teams and are VPs of sales and doing a great job. And we've had others that we pushed out too quickly. And as we've started to tier out our go-to-market model, we have big accounts and medium accounts and smaller accounts. And over the years, sometimes we got a little too aggressive maybe and put someone in a big account job that should have been in a medium account job. And, you know, you really have to adjust almost quarter to quarter to try to figure out how the personnel is allocated the right way. And that's the hardest part. And then you miss, right? And the hardest thing about being a growth company is that we wait, right, to see how we're going to do towards the end of the year, and then you all of a sudden bulk hire. I think, you know, if I was to give any advice to younger companies, is to try to spread it out a little bit more, you know. But it's hard, right? You raise a bunch of money, or you're like us, you start with no money and you don't take a salary for 2 years, and you just hire your, you know, people as you close deals. But then once you get some capital, you start to scale. And it always feels like towards the end of the year, you say, all right, we're going to hit our numbers. We're feeling really, really good. We've had a bunch of years of really great growth. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, go. And, you know, I've always been a leader that if you give me 10 bodies, I'm getting them hired and in the door as fast as I can, because you never know what the next few quarters is going to lead, right? And so when you do anything quickly, you screw up. You know, and if I say, all right, Jay, you got 10, go, you know, you're going to try to fill those 10 and you're probably going to do your best job. I mean, you can evaluate sales talent, I'm sure, as well as anybody, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, salespeople are good sellers and we're good storytellers and we interview really, really well. And it's hard. It's hard to find the right person for the right job. And, you know, some sales jobs, if you work for a high growth SaaS company, it's very different than working for a really mature software company, right? I mean, we are a different job. If you're a global account rep for Seismic and you're a global account rep for IBM, you might as well work in 2 different industries.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's trying to figure out all those pieces every day. And I remind our team that it doesn't stop. I mean, that's the hardest part of our job, right? It's it's every single day they have to get up and they have to put in the work to get to where they need to be consistently. And if you don't do that, and you take, you know, days, weeks, months off, then with a 6-month sales cycle, you're not going to realize it's on you until it's on you.
Yeah, it's hard to guard against that complacency, right? Especially when you're doing well, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, that's the hardest time. Trust me, I remind them.
I'm sure you do. Who reminds you, by the way?
Guilty Irish conscience, I guess. My mom is in there somewhere. Yeah, I think, you know, I'm a normal guy, just like you. You know, I'm a Boston kid, and I grew up in West Lynn, and, you know, I've always wanted to build things, and my family was in construction, my dad and my uncles, and, you know, I take great pride in building things and building teams and watching people succeed. And, I don't ever take anything for granted. I don't think that we're done ever. I think once you think you've arrived, you're screwed. And, I've always tried to remind myself first and everybody else that it's the companies that believe their own hype end up in the dustbin. And, we're not perfect, but we'll never end up there because we think we're better than what we are. I'll tell you that.
It's amazing. I used to watch, and it's probably up there on my shelf behind me, but I used to watch Come Fly With Me, the Michael Jordan DVD, every single day of the basketball season when I was in high school, like probably junior year, senior year, maybe even sophomore year. And one of the things, what you were just saying actually reminded me of what he said towards the end of that video, which is, to not be complacent and to treat every, one of my favorite songs by Jay-Z says my first song, and he treats every song like it's his first song, and what you need to do in order to produce that and to produce the best. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's got to be in there too. It's that's why Jordan's Jordan and Jay-Z's Jay-Z, right? And it's one of my favorites is that the relationship between hard work and success is not direct, right? So if you work hard, you're not guaranteed to be successful, but if you don't work hard, you have no shot.
Yeah.
And it needs to just be in there, and some people have it and some people don't. And it's hard. I think I tell the team here, like, you should wake up most days and want to come to work. Right. Most, right? That means Seismics is doing a pretty good job. If you wake up every single day and you're really fired up to go to work, I think you're a little weird. But most of the time, you should be fired up to come here.
Yeah, and then the delta there is that Ed or someone there is pushing them just a little bit further than they would push themselves, and that's why it's not always. That's why it's not all the time. It's most of the time, right? But then the reward comes, of course, because you see the hard, personal gratification, at least for me personally, when you put something out there, you work towards it, you're grinding, it's really difficult, and then all of a sudden you see the fruits of your labor, and I'm like, yes, and then all of a sudden the days continue. You mentioned one thing that I want to just double back on, if you don't mind, is that you said that something to the effect of you're in the car, you're driving home on a Friday night, end up calling one of the reps and saying, it's going to be okay, it's not going to be bad, something to that effect. I'm not sure if it was you or not. Forgive me if it was not you. It might have been somebody that you were talking to that I heard. But there's a 500 pen story.
Yeah.
That was you, right?
Yeah.
So tell the listeners about that.
Well, I've known a lot of our reps for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. So I've been able to build some trust and build some tight relationships with folks, and I have two sons. They're both in high school, and I coach them on their football teams from third grade to eighth grade, both of them. And it was one of my favorite. Football is an interesting game because it's a team game, but it's also, when you're little, like, it's scary. You get hurt, right? And sometimes the first time you get knocked down, you're freaked out, and they're not necessarily in pain. They're scared. And, I'm a big guy. And so every time they come to the sideline, I'd give them a hug, because that's what kids need when they're afraid, is security. And, you look them in the eye and tell them everything's fine. You're going to be okay. And I think we need that as adults too. We all have hard jobs. We have stressful jobs. I push people at targets. And sometimes you need a hug. Sometimes things aren't going your way, and you need someone that genuinely cares about you to tell you that it's going to be all right, or that it's not, But then you also get to a point where people are successful, and you talk about, Jay-Z trying to treat every song as the first song. A lot of the successful reps here have had really good runs, and, occasionally when they haven't closed anything in a while, I send them, I don't know where it started, but I send them big giant boxes of 500 pens from Amazon that show up unannounced on the weekend. And it's just it's a fun kind of joke between us where we, I let them know that I'm thinking about them, even though they haven't closed anything. And it's kind of a good, tough love way to say, I do believe in you. Like, if I thought their ego was fragile and they were at a place where they couldn't pull through, I probably wouldn't push on that. But I think it's a good sign of trust that shows, like, look, I still believe that you have it. And, just because it hasn't come in a while, here's a reminder. If you do need a pen to go sign that contract, you have a few. And, you got to be careful though. If you send that box of pens to the wrong person on a Saturday, you could break someone's human spirit. But if you send it to the right person, we also send cupcakes sometimes. There's one of my favorite stories from last quarter. One of our best reps was pushing a deal with a big Canadian bank, and it was close to the end of the quarter. And Saturday morning, his wife opened the front door, and on the porch was a huge box of 24 cupcakes with the bank's logo on them. And she turned and ran back into the kitchen and said, "Honey, this is so great. I'm so proud of you. You finally closed it. Did the bank send you these cupcakes?" And he just looked and he walked out of the room and he said, "No, that's Calnan. That's not the bank. I know exactly where those came from because the deal wasn't done yet." And that's the stuff that keeps it fun,
That's fantastic. I love that. I absolutely love that. That is great. That is really great. Has it ever backfired, by the way? You said sometimes you have to be careful. Have it backfired with the pens or one of those things you're like, that didn't necessarily go the way I wanted it to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I have a bunch of colorful voicemails saved, over the years where people tell me how they really feel about it, but it never, you got to be, I think I usually tend to push the buttons at the right times. And so nothing crazy, no police cases or HR issues or anything like that yet. You never know.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, we'll get you out of here on this last question, which is, if people have been listening to this and they one day want to see cupcakes from you or something to that effect, and frankly want to go work for Seismic, how can they get in touch with you just to frankly follow up or just say thank you for doing this? And are you hiring? And if so, what positions are you hiring for?
Yeah, we're hiring across the board. So fresh grads for the inside sales team, outside quota carrying reps. We're hiring in sales operations. We're hiring in marketing. So we're lucky. We're continuing. We're going to have another great year this year, and we're going to head into next year, hopefully to do another big year. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I try to be responsive. So if anybody is interested in opportunities, feel free to shoot me a message and a connect on LinkedIn, and I'll usually pass you off to the right person on my team who's hiring. We're the founders of the company. There was half of us here in Boston and half of us in sunny San Diego. So we have kind of two corporate offices and hiring in both. So depending at this time of year, it's probably better to be in San Diego. But we are hiring on both coasts, and then we have offices all over the place in between, up in the Bay Area, in Chicago, and New York, down in Atlanta, London, Germany, Paris, Singapore, Australia. So we're kind of growing everywhere. And if anybody's interested in helping to join the cause, let me know.
And mention this podcast because I assure you that Ed will give you extra special treatment.
Oh yeah, guaranteed interview if you give my man a shout out.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you, Ed. Much appreciated.
Of course. Good to see you again, bud.
Goodbye, everybody. Hold on one second.